barbarians from the gate.
I got into the labor movement not because I wanted to negotiate wages. I got into the labor movement because I saw it as a vehicle to do massive social change to improve the lots of people.
Let's take these son of a out and give America back to America where we belong. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, the Tea Party can go straight to hell. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life.
Welcome back. Start of hour number 2 begins right now. Brian Sommerfield, Trucker Randy, your defending fathers, and very pleased to have Steve Deace join us this hour. Welcome to the program.
Guys, it is always good to talk to you. How are you?
Very good.
Good, sir. Glad to have you on the show, Steve.
You will love that we are doing this show under a blanket of fresh white snow, and it will be continuing to fall for at least the next 4 or 5 hours.
Wow. It is March 26th, right? It is March 26th, correct?
Yes, it is.
That's the date. Maybe 27th,
actually.
Yeah, it's even later than that. Wow. Don't you guys have a Major League Baseball season starting here in about 4 days up there? I think,
Monday, the Tigers are going to have opening day at Comerica Park in Detroit.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, it's my home state. I grew up there, you know that, go blue and all, but I'm glad I'm not living there right now. Our weather has stunk enough, but to sit there and watch it snow like that on March 27th, that's demoralizing.
Amen, brother. Hey, Steve, you wrote a book. What's the title of the book?
Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again.
And you lay out in that book your ideas about going forward in the political system. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the outline, what you're trying to accomplish with this book?
Well, Randy, I really thought we needed a plan. And, you know, I think what we do on social media, sharing our ideas, is important. I think what guys like us do in talk radio is important. I think even writing books about why we're right and the other side is wrong is important. Obviously, I do those things for a living myself, but ultimately they're not a plan. Blogging isn't a plan. Venting isn't a plan. Calling a radio show or hosting one isn't a plan. And we have lacked sort of a blueprint, a framework of how to do what we actually believe for a long time. And I go to the foreword that David Limbaugh writes for my book, and he said, you know, I've written several bestsellers. I get asked to speak around the country about these books, and people always come up to me and they say, I'm so fired up. What do I do? And he goes, you know, I'll tell them, stand up for what you believe. And they'll say, well, what does that look like? And he'll say, I don't know, but do it anyway. So I thought we needed something practical. And I think you guys know, because you know me, I'm a little different than a lot of other national syndicated talk show hosts in that I'm a guy that actually does political activism who's an ideologue, not an ideologue pontificating on political activism. So I've been involved in campaigns at a strategy level, at a nuts and bolts level, at an organizational level. I helped to organize the U.S. Senate debate we're going to have in my home state next month. I'm working on organizing a new pro-life group for our state, well, a real pro-life group for our state. I've been involved in campaigns. So I do a lot more on the nuts and bolts of the process so that we understand when the establishment and the ruling class comes to us and they use all these technocratic terms. I think it's really important for us to understand when we're being lied to. I mean, listeners like ours will ask our congressmen and senators simple questions like, why did you vote to fund Obamacare? And they'll send back 25-paragraph responses. It's a lawyer's technique. You bury people in paperwork so they can't find the needle in the haystack. You see how long the reply is, and you just give up. Well, I want to help you sift through that and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. And then also how do we go on offense? How do we actually do what we believe? What have I seen being involved in campaigns that works, and what have I seen being involved in campaigns that does not? And the good thing is I've got all kinds of friends that are GOP consultants, some who I think are terrible and some who I think are really good. So having worked and been in the sausage factory myself, I think that I'm uniquely qualified to write a book that sort of bridges the gap between the process and principles. How do we actually implement what we think. Because I think right now what we have is we've got a process party, that's the ruling class, the establishment, and all they care about is winning to lead. And that means we're just about winning, and then we'll lead later, we'll fight later, and then later, of course, never comes because they're always concerned about the next news cycle or the next poll. We want to lead to win. We want to show the country we have a better vision for you than what's currently being undertaken. But to get there, we have to figure out, how do we implement these things? How does it go from my Facebook status or my blog actually into public policy and the public debate? And that's what my book is about.
Great. You must have been looking at the clock because you wrapped that up exactly right on time. We're with Steve Deace, heard here on Patriot Voice every night from 9 to midnight. He is a brother in every possible way of your defending fathers. We'll talk about his book a little bit more when we come back. It is Rules for Patriots. Stick around. We are your defending fathers. Back, Brian Sommerfield, Trucker Randy, your defending fathers. Steve Deace is on with us for this hour. He has written a book called Rules for Patriots: How Conservatives Can Win Again. He is a national talk show host. He is on right here on Patriot Voice every night from 9 to midnight. And Steve, you have a lot of fans around northern Michigan. They love that you talk straight, you've got no problem bringing up the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that you've got a positive message. And one of the things that I truly love about your book, the left has its playbook, Saul Alinsky's infamous Rules for Radicals. Now the good guys have theirs. I think that's a great summary.
Well, thank you, Brian. And I think that is something we have long needed, and it's something that I think will work. And I think Mark Levin says this in his endorsement. It's something that will work if you're running for office, if you're hosting a talk show, if you're just a local Tea Party activist and you're involved in your own party political system, or as simple as, I know these topics are going to come up at the next time we get together as a family, or I've got neighbors that who I want to reach, and I want to reach them with the truths of where liberty comes from and how we preserve it for future generations before it's lost in this one. So it really has an all-encompassing practicality to it. And the beauty of it is, I've had some people say, well, why put it in a book and therefore the bad guys get to read it? The reality is this plan won't work for their worldview. Because in order for this plan to work, you actually have to be able to make claims on absolute truth and moral certainty that can withstand scrutiny. Their worldview cannot. That's why they have to have a different plan. That's why they have to resort to name-calling. That's why they have to resort to political correctness so that there's never a debate in the first place, because really that worldview is based on magical thinking. It's what I call policy by desire. Well, I just want that to be true, so we'll just make it so even though it's not. And so when your worldview is built on a house of sand, taking a battle plan that is built for people whose worldview is based on a solid rock and letting them take a look at it actually won't do them any good at all, because if they were to try to implement these things, it would force them to reveal how shallow and vapid their worldview actually is.
Well, the point that you make right there, Steve, is a good one. When we get into these debates where we're in a public forum and the other side is there, their entire arguments are usually based in emotions and feelings, and we should do this because it feels right. It's the right thing to do. We come back with facts. We come back with solid principles, like you say, that are based on that rock-solid foundation. When you start putting that truth out there in that way, they either want to scream or call you names or change the subject. They don't even want to talk about it anymore.
You're right, Randy, but the majority of Americans, if I could, based on, going around the country, speaking around the country, what I do for a living, I would say about 8 to 15% of Americans have a solidly biblical worldview. That doesn't mean they necessarily all agree on what the timing or manner of Christ's return would be, or some of those other theological distinctions that have divided Christendom throughout the ages. But on the basic precepts of Christianity and what the Bible teaches, and how liberty was formed and founded in this country, I'd say about 8 to 15% of Americans get it. I would say about 8 to 15% of Americans are sold out totally to progressive Marxist statism, and are essentially unreachable. They have bathed in this. This is their gospel, and they're going to live by it and die by it. And then I think in the middle, about 75% of Americans their worldview is what I would describe as reactionary. They are reacting to what they see doesn't work. When they see the Bush administration in its second term go off the rails, they react and vote for even more of what they said they didn't like out of Bush, with even bigger government. When they see that doesn't work, after voting for Obama and seeing what Obamacare does, then we have a Tea Party revolution in 2010. Then they re-elect Barack Obama. Now they want it. Now it's looking like 2014 might even be worse for the Democrats than 2010. This is reactionary thinking. There's no solid rock. It's shifting sands. And so those are the people that I want to reach. But I think if we're going to reach them, we actually can't begin with a truth proposition. We have to acknowledge the postmodern age in which we live. It used to be that you started with propositional truth and then moved on to a narrative, a story, or testimony. But postmodernism has deconstructed all of that. If you begin with propositional truth, if people don't want to accept it because they're living a life that is in contrary to that, or it would force them to make choices they don't want to have to make, they'll just dismiss it and say, well, that's true for you and not true for me. So you actually have to begin with a narrative, a story, a testimony that destroys how phony that idea is. And then once you show people how this propositional truth has changed you or somebody you love, and you reach them emotionally, then you can talk about the propositional truth. Let me give you an example. Let's look at guns. Whenever there's a tragic school shooting, we see this pattern play itself out. The statists go to their media and use that as an excuse to say that's why the government needs to take everybody's Second Amendment freedoms away, because we're seeing innocent children die because there's too many guns. We respond back with, well, we believe the Second Amendment gives us the right to keep and bear arms. See, we respond back with propositional truth. They lead with emotion. They win the argument. We win on public policy, but they win on hearts and minds. We need to actually begin with emotion, because emotion's on our side too. We need to say stuff like, well, I believe that if a young lady is alone in a parking garage late at night and she is being followed by somebody who wants to do her harm, she ought to be able to defend herself. Why are you against women defending themselves? I believe that a rural elderly couple in northern Michigan who might face a home invasion and the police are minutes, if not a longer time away because there's a snowstorm, they ought to be able to defend themselves. Why don't you want to defend yourself? Why don't you want to let old people defend themselves? Why do you want to take the right to self-defense away from old people? Take that kind of a story, a narrative, a testimony, pierce the bubble, and then you get a chance, I think, at that point to discuss propositional truth.
This is outlined in your book. This is exactly the type of chapters that you lay it out in the book. Looking at that table of contents and the different chapters, where do you start that process in the book? Is it right at the beginning, or is it
right well, the first thing we've got to do is listeners to stations like yours know the truth. But having done a lot of PR for this book in the last week and a half, I will tell you that we've got as many low information voters on the right as there are on the left. People that are just being fed a talking point bubble of cliches from the RNC and from the Republican establishment that just simply are not true. So the first thing, before we talk about how to win, we got to talk about why we lose. And the truth is, Mitt Romney did not lose the 2012 presidential election for any of the reasons that audiences in many conservative enclaves around the country are being told. And it's not just the liberal media lying to them, their own political party is lying to them. It's just, the numbers just aren't there. And if you go through my book, the book's about 220 pages and there's over 100 footnotes, or about 100 footnotes. So the book is very well sourced, documented. Audiences can go research these numbers for themselves. So I think before we talk about how we win, we've got to figure out what actually happened in this last election and what is happening in this political party, because the numbers actually show the party is slowly but surely hemorrhaging its white middle class base. And, it's interesting, since the book came out, the Cook Report, which is one of the most respected political insider trading sort of blogs in the country, did an exhaustive study on who are independents. And what they found is that independents are not these people that don't want to make a choice and drive down the middle of the road and don't want to have to, take a stand. That in reality, the majority of independents are people that believe both political parties don't mean what they say, and they say that's particularly true of center or right or center-right independents, that they actually tend to be more conservative than the average Republican voter. They've just given up on the Republican Party, and you saw this play out in 2012 when Mitt Romney got 4.5 million fewer, or 4.5 white voters that voted for McCain in 2008 did not vote in 2012. And you did not see the huge influx of evangelicals that Ralph Reed and others promised. In fact, fewer evangelicals voted. There was a Catholic on the ticket of both major political parties. Fewer Catholics voted. In fact, Mitt Romney got a smaller percentage of the Mormon vote in 2012 than George W. Bush got in 2004. So it has nothing to do with the Hispanic vote. If you run the math of how many Hispanic voters Romney was going to need to compensate for the loss of those white voters, he was going to need to win about 72% of the Hispanic vote, when on average Hispanics have voted 31% of the time for Republicans in presidential elections since 1980. And I've got all these numbers memorized. They're all in the book. The reality is a lot of conservatives around the country are being lied to, and they're being lied to by a ruling class in both parties who are colluding together in order to grow government. They have different ideas of what they want to do with that big government, of course, but the people standing in the way are people like you, the defending fathers, our Tea Party patriots around the country, and that's why they're united against you, and that's why they're lying to you.
Very interesting. One of the things, we got a couple minutes here before the bottom of the hour break. Bottom line is, so many people hear authors talk about their books and they go on media blitzes and discuss them. What would you say to our audience is the number one reason that they should invest in buying your book?
I interview a lot of authors, part of my job. I get pitched all the time. I wanted to write a book that actually answered questions I would have if I were in the audience. If I didn't have access to the information people like us get because of what we do for a living, if I didn't have access to the newsmakers that we get because of what we do for a living, what questions would I want to have answered? What topics would I want brought up? If I were in their shoes, what would encourage me? What would help me to actually live out my belief system? And for all the pitches I get for authors all the time, I never get pitched that book, so I decided to write it myself.
We've got. I want to ask a real quick question. We've got about 2 minutes before we're done with this part of the segment. What was it like going out there and pitching different people for either endorsements or letting them read your book and give some information on it? Donald Trump, Mark Levin, you've got Newt Gingrich. What was it like going on the other side and doing that from the other side of the table?
The endorsements were easy. In fact, we actually had to stop. We were going to get so many of them. And listen, I could have gotten you endorsements from Rick Santorum, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, but the publisher decided not to put anybody who would likely be on a ballot in 2014 and 2016, decided not to have them endorse the book. So the endorsement aspect was easy because of where I live and what I do. I've got a lot of contacts, but people also really loved what we had to say in the book. So the endorsement part was simple. The publishing aspect, though, I will tell you that there is a huge notion in the mainstream world that audiences like ours don't exist. And they were blown away by the backlash against what they tried to do to Duck Dynasty, for example. Mm-hmm. These people are all convinced that God-fearing, liberty-loving patriots have all been replaced by 23-year-old Randian libertarian materialists, and that all these people died overnight, despite the fact that Rick Santorum got twice as many votes in the 2012 presidential primary than Ron Paul did, and Newt Gingrich got 750,000 more votes than Ron Paul did. They really think that all these traditional traditional conservatives have all been replaced by these young, materialistic, leaning libertarians. And so several times when I've got one of the most well-known book agents in the country, Frank Breeden, who's represented almost every big name in the conservative movement. He thought this was a great script and we'd get it instantly published, but it took quite a while.
Okay. We got Steve Deace on with us. He'll be on with us still in the next segment. Stick around. We're going to be talking to him not only about his book, but we're going to branch out in some other areas, give you a taste of what he does on a day-to-day basis on stations like this right here. We are your Defending Fathers. Brian Sommerfield, Trucker Randy, your Defending Fathers. We've got Steve Deace on with us this hour. Steve, so appreciative of you taking the time and being with us this morning. Steve Deace is on from 9 to midnight, weekdays right here on Patriot Voice. And I'm going to ask you a question that you will probably not get on any other show, but I think you will appreciate it, and it will allow our listeners to get a different side of you that they might not have. And one of the truths that I live by is that if God's going to use us, one, we have to be anticipating Him using us. We need to pray for doors to be opened and recognize those doors, and almost preparing ourselves for waves of opportunity that God will send our way. And with the success that you've had over the last couple of years with the radio program, with you writing more and more, I see your name pop up on more and more different places where you are writing pieces and being published. This book is not just all of a sudden, oh, guess what, now he's an author. You have been honing that skill for a while. What I found intriguing, and not until I asked you about it a couple weeks ago, is you had the opportunity of possibly leaving everything that was going great for you in Iowa and possibly taking a move to New York. And I was intrigued by that, and I asked you about it, and you gave me a very honest answer. And I would love for you to be able to share that answer with our listeners this morning. Well,
I'll have to go back and remember what I told you, so hopefully I remember.
Well, here's the thing I know. I know you're a conservative. You speak from the heart, and my guess is the answer is going to be the same exact one you gave me a couple of weeks ago.
Well, what happened is a guy by the name of Phil Boyce, who is sort of the founding father of conservative talk radio, and he discovered Sean Hannity, discovered Mark Levin, managed Michael Savage, managed Laura Ingraham, a lot of the big names in our industry, and he's really high on me. And him and I have become friends over the last couple of years, and he's helped me a lot with my current show. And one of the things he does for Salem Broadcasting, you guys just ran the SRN News update, so he does a lot of the national talent consulting for Salem Communications, and he also runs their New York City station. And they had their guy leave to go work for Cumulus, and so he said, hey, I've been looking for an opportunity for you and I to work closely together. This might be it. Why don't you come and try out? And I just right away knew in my spirit I was supposed to go. I've had opportunities to do market hopping and go other places in the past before I was syndicated, and it's not what I want to do. It's not what my family wants to do. We like where we live. If we move anywhere, it's going to be someplace south where they have the right 3 seasons and no state income tax. Can I get an amen on that?
Yes, you can get an amen. We'll be your amen corner for today.
I appreciate that. But this is, obviously the tri-state area isn't the best place to raise a family, but, no one wants to live in Dagobah, but when Yoda calls Luke Skywalker for Jedi training, you have to show up. You can't say no to that. So I just knew that this is something God wanted us to do, and we discussed it as a family, and we agreed to go try out. I went out there for a week. We did really well. It came down to me and a former U.S. congressman, and weeks went by, and I didn't really fret. And I'd have people that were interested in me or friends with me, like you guys asked me about it. And essentially, for us as a family, it really came down to this: this is a mission field. I mean, having been out there, I will tell you, I have walked the streets of the station the Salem station in New York, where it's located, is right on Wall Street. It's right next to Trinity Church, where 3 of your founding fathers are buried. 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence are buried right there. The guy who said, "Don't give up the ship," is buried in that cemetery right next to the Trinity Building. And why is it called the Trinity Building? Gee, well, why do you think where do you think they got Trinity from? Just a hop, skip, and a jump, catty corner are the steps there at Freedom Hall, where George Washington gave the first inaugural address. And when you walk through these areas, guys, and you see how little this matters to the average person walking down the street, the legacy that they are a part of, and they just don't care. And this is one of the most leftist, Marxist enclaves in the country. While I was out there, the mayor and the governor were saying pro-life people are not welcome in New York.
Yep.
Okay, and this was going on while I was out there trying out for this job. And so really all the reasons why you wouldn't want to take your family there are really all the reasons why a Christian ought to go to a place like that. But we sort of we left it up to God, and we said, hey, God, give us an obvious answer. Either A, make it that, because it's also not a cheap place to live, so we weren't going to force it. I didn't have to go there. So, have them either give us an offer that makes it that this is clearly where you want us to go, and to try and reach some people in a place that has the amount of power wielded in that community, guys. I mean, decisions are made there in that New York City, in that 202 area code. Decisions are made there that impact lives all over the world, the amount of financial and human capital there, and yet there's almost no knowledge of the gospel there at all. And so for that reason, even though everything intuitively would say you certainly don't want to move there, it's more expensive, and you don't want to raise a family there, those are actually the reasons why our family considered doing it. But in the end, Salem decided to hire, it came down to me and a former U.S. congressman, they decided to hire him instead.
So the answer was made for you, basically.
Yes, yeah, and we are satisfied with that. And but the beauty is, one of the things I did when I went out there, I did not hide my faith. We brought Kirk Cameron on the show to talk about his new movie, Unstoppable, about why do bad things happen to good people. One of the things we've done on my show, we do it every year on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. We have our interview with Margaret Sanger. We had an actress come in, and we scripted out her comments in response to my questions according to what we could actually document the founder of Planned Parenthood actually said during her lifetime. And I played that for New York City audiences. So I at the very least, I will guarantee you that there are people in New York City that heard something for a week on that radio station, which is also my New York City affiliate, so they hear me a lot at night anyway, but they heard stuff in Afternoon Drive in New York City they've never, ever heard in their lives. And being out there, and doing a lot of mainstream media and doing work with MSNBC during the 2012 election, what I have found is that the average American, even the average liberal, is not hostile to what we believe. In fact, hostility would indicate they actually know what it is that we believe and they've decided against it. Really what it is an ignorance. They really don't understand. I had an executive producer at MSNBC in a job interview tell me, for the first time in my life, I actually could see why someone might think the way you do. I used to think all you people were crazy, but you actually have facts, figures. You actually critically think. I've never until now accepted that an intelligent person could actually believe what you believe. And these areas where all this authority is wielded, the 212 and 202 area codes, where lives all over the world, jobs all over the world, are determined by the decisions made in those 2 area codes, and almost nowhere to be found in those 2 area codes, the influence of the gospel. And then we wonder why the rest of the culture is the way that it is.
Amazing.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that part historically about New York City, right where you're talking about. It's pretty much the backdrop for the book The Harbinger. Mm-hmm. And in everything that you just brought up, might as well just come right off of those pages. You're right on the money.
And this is true everywhere. I mean, the reality is there's still a lot more of us than there are of the statists. But the statism is headquartered in 3 places: New York, D.C., and L.A. Now, why is it there? Well, New York is the financial capital of the world. D.C. is the political capital of the world. L.A. is the cultural capital of the world. So even though we still tremendously out here in red state, flyover country, middle America, we still tremendously outnumber the statists, they have grabbed control of the three most important cultural locations in the country so that it almost doesn't matter who wins elections. They still determine the debate. They still determine the conversation. And so unless we get our people, are willing to leave places like Iowa or willing to leave places like northern Michigan and go to those kinds of places the way that, those pilgrims were willing to get on a Mayflower and to come here. The way that the early Christians were able to strap on their sandals 2 by 2 and go to places like Antioch and Ephesus and Corinth. Corinth was worse than Las Vegas and Hollywood combined. The Greeks thought, and the Greeks were so depraved themselves, they thought Corinth was so bad they gave them their own verb. It was called to Corinthanize if you were an especially immoral or lascivious person. It was considered one of the headquarters of the homosexual fetish in ancient Greece. And yet, this is where Paul is writing letters and planting churches. If we're not willing to go to those three areas, I don't care how much good we do in Michigan, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, we won't put a dent in statism in this country because that's where the mouth of the river is. If you want to dam a river, you don't dam it down the stream. By then, gravity takes over, water gets through. You dam a river at the source, and the source is L.A., New York, and Washington, D.C. That's where the true power and influence comes from.
And that's probably in your prayer process of deciding to go out there and go to New York for that week. That was probably a large part of justification is, am I supposed to, God, go over to New York and take these guys on so they hear my message? Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, though, in some respects, talking to them is almost easier than talking to some of our own people, in that they're very blunt, they're very upfront. If you're not trying to slather them up with horse pucky, they will listen. They actually like confrontational conversation. Sometimes the hardest things to do, if you have people that are born into sort of a cultural conformity Christianity, whereas they may not themselves be Christians, but they're born into a family or a subculture where it's the accepted norm, and so even though there's never been a repentance in their own lives, they think just because they've always gone to church or they've always voted Republican, that means they're good to go. Sometimes those are the hardest people to reach. You guys see that in your own activism in your own political party. Is you guys run into people who have, because they've been Republicans all their lives, they think that means they're patriots. Because they grew up in a Christian family, and where I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where Kent and Ottawa counties have per capita as many churches as any two counties in the United States. And so they think because they're from Holland and they went to Calvin College or they went to Hope, that means that they're a Christian, even though there's never really been a repentance experience in their life where they've truly said, I am a sinner and I need to be saved. But they're conforming to a culture. And that's where you run into a very pharisaical, external group of people who are adhering to a form of groupthink. And if you challenge them to actually live out what they believe, or they claim to believe, they will look at you as the enemy. They will say, what, we're not good enough? Why are you criticizing us? The real bad guys are over there. And that's the exact same reaction that Christ got from the Sanhedrin. Why are you coming after us when the Romans are doing all these bad things? We're not the bad guys here. We are the lesser of two evils. Does any of this sound familiar? Dead on, brother. Amazing. This is all laid out in the book. We're talking with Steve Deace. We've posted it already, Brian, on our Facebook page and our website. We have a link there for people to be able to buy a copy of his book, Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again. And Steve, just a quick comment. Why did you decide to use the font that looks so much like Solowinski's Rules for Radicals?
That was my idea. The publisher went with it. I loved it. I thought it would be a good takeoff.
Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time immensely, and you got a lot of fans up here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We love you guys, and go.
Hey, welcome back. Final segment of hour number 2. Brian Sommerfield, Trucker Randy, your defending fathers. Well, it makes you want to run out and buy a copy of that, doesn't it?
I put a link to Steve's website where you can purchase the book. It's also available on Amazon and all the other book websites. But one thing that really struck me, he said it at the beginning, but in the website itself, it says about the book. Time is running out on American exceptionalism. The light of liberty is flickering. At no point since we still had the redcoats on the shores of our country has freedom been more imperiled. This time, it's not an invading foreign power that threatens us, but our own government gone wild, unhinged from its constitutional limits. Many great books have been written about what we should believe and why, or why the less beliefs are flawed. But never before has a book been written that shows how to do what we believe. Until now. The left has its playbook, Saul Alinsky's infamous Rules for Radicals. Now the good guys have their book. Endorsed by the who's who of the conservative movement, we present the Rules for Patriots. And you know, it's really funny. I've never thought of that. A book to show us how to do what we believe. How do you do what you believe? How do you actually get involved? How do you get engaged when you have these discussions or when you're with family members? You know, for Steve to lay it out there, I thought that was a phenomenal twist of how we've been trained almost innately to react. That school shooting, Brian, and Sandy Hook. You know, when the left and Obama immediately was going to call for, you know, gun control, that this was the last mass shooting that this country was ever going to see, we're going after the guns.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole discussion we had on this show about the UN Small Arms Treaty and about all these, Joe Biden forming this special select committee that he was going to figure out a way to get the guns. We were answering it wrong. Steve made a great analogy there, was why are you against a principal of a school going to a door where a masked gunman is shooting the locks off the door, and you're going to pass laws and have policies that keeps her from having a gun in her hand and stopping him before he ever gets inside the building? Why do you guys want to do that? Why is it that people in Detroit, okay, are getting invaded in their homes at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? Why would you guys want to prevent them from protecting themselves and their children in their homes? That's, you know what, just to buy the book for that, to change our thinking, to show us how to do what we believe. I think that is out of this whole, all of this that's on the website that I'm reading here, that sentence is the most powerful one there. For him to be able to put into a clear, concise, 220-page book exactly what the rules should be for patriots so that we can get the message out. And like he said, what was it, 75% of the people in the middle just need to hear a good argument.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to hear the truth presented to them in a way that they go, you know what? That side is right. The other side is wrong. This is the way to possibly get the information in your hands, in your Tea Party groups, in your political groups. Can you imagine if each individual county party, Brian, bought this book and actually gave a seminar on it, actually made it mandatory reading for its executive committee members so that we get to the platform and we get that information out about the platform in a way that is convincing, honest, truthful, but gives it from a perspective where people can understand it better. We've just been wrong on messaging. And I think this book based on the people that have endorsed it and the things they've said about it, it's very simple. This book may be the answer to being really a guideline for us to follow, so that we can understand the debate and be able to get that messaging out there better. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Are you saying that I might have to move that ahead of my Blood Moons book?
I definitely think so.
I think so too.
I really do. I'm looking at the outline. I'm looking at the reviews, the previews on it, and absolutely should be priority reading immediately.
Well, I thought it was a great hour of radio, great interview with Steve Deace, and it goes by too fast. And again, he's on for 3 hours every single day here.
9 to midnight.
Yep. And I'm sure he's like, wow, I was just getting warmed up. My hour's done. Hey, stick around. We've got another hour to go on this Thursday. We are your Defending Fathers.
This is the Patriot Voice Radio Network.